The alarm on Dana Mercer's phone went off at 5:30 in the morning, but she was already awake. She had been lying on her back for nearly 20 minutes, staring at the water stain on the bedroom ceiling that looked like the shape of Lake Michigan, listening to Tyler's breathing through the thin wall between their two rooms. Steady, even, good. That was the first thing she checked every single morning before her feet ever touched the floor. Was he breathing okay? Was the pain bad in the night? Did he sleep or just pretend to? She rolled out of bed carefully, the old springs groaning under her, and padded across the cold linoleum in her socks. The apartment was small. 2 bedrooms, if you were being generous about calling the second one a bedroom. A kitchen the size of a walk-in closet. A bathroom where you could touch both walls if you stretched your arms out wide. It was not much, but it was theirs. And Dana had fought like hell through 3 years of late rent notices and insurance denials in a school district that needed to be dragged kicking and screaming into doing the right thing before she had learned to call this place home. She cracked open Tyler's door and peeked inside. Her son was lying in his bed, eyes still closed, dark blonde hair sticking up in 4 different directions, looking for all the world like any other 8-year-old boy on the planet who would rather sleep another hour than face the day. Except Tyler Mercer could not just hop out of bed like other 8-year-olds. Tyler's legs had not worked right since he was 3 years old, and every year the specialists at Riley Children's Hospital in Indianapolis had a slightly different name for it. A slightly more complicated explanation with longer words and grimmer faces, but the bottom line never changed. His muscles were failing him, slowly, steadily, and there was no cure, only management, only devices, only the daily grind of making a body that did not fully cooperate get through another 24 hours. "Hey, Bug Dana," whispered from the doorway. Tyler's eyes fluttered open. He looked at the ceiling for a moment the way kids do when they are deciding whether the world is worth joining yet. "Is it time already?" he mumbled. "It's time." He made the universal sound of every child on earth who did not want to get up. And for just 1 second, just one beautiful, ordinary second, he was exactly like every other kid in Millhaven, Indiana. Dana held on to that second every single morning. It was one of the things that kept her moving when nothing else could. "5 more minutes, Tyler said. "You said that 4 minutes ago. Then 5 more minutes from now." Dana smiled despite herself and sat down on the edge of his bed. She brushed the hair back from his forehead, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The apartment building settled around them the way old buildings do in early October. Pipes ticking somewhere inside the walls. A neighbor's television murmuring through the floor above. Outside, a garbage truck ground its way down Alderman Street, hydraulics hissing in the gray pre-dawn. "Did you sleep okay?" Dana asked. "My shoulders hurt a little from that loaner chair." "Not bad, though. You want the cream before we head out? Can we just go? I want to see if Marcus is at the bus stop before the Henderson's dog gets loose again." Dana's chest tightened the way it always did when Tyler talked about racing to the bus stop, about keeping up, about the 100 ordinary things that should have been simple and weren't. "Yeah, baby, let's go see Marcus." This was the part of the morning that nobody ever saw. Nobody applauded this part. There was no audience, no recognition. Just Dana sliding her arms underneath her son's body, one arm under his shoulders and one under his knees, and lifting him the way she had lifted him every single morning for the past 14 months. Ever since the apartment's narrow hallway made it impossible to wheel him from the bedroom doorway all the way to the front porch without a 40-point turn that left them both frustrated before the day had even started. He was getting heavier. She felt it more now than she had 6 months ago. Her lower back had been filing complaints in the deep of the night for the past 3 months, a dull, insistent ache that arrived somewhere around 2 in the morning and stayed until she got up and moved around. She had never told anyone about it. What was the alternative? Make Tyler feel like a burden when the world already worked hard enough at making him feel like one. "You're getting big," she grunted, only half joking. "Sorry," Tyler said quietly. "Don't you dare apologize for growing Tyler James Mercer. I want you huge. I want you so tall, I can't even reach the top of your head." "Then how are you going to fix my hair in the morning?" "We'll figure it out. We always figure it out." That was the whole truth of Dana Mercer's life pressed into 5 words. They always figured it out. She had figured out the hospital billing department when Riley sent a statement for $11,000 that insurance refused to touch. She had figured out the school district when Millhaven Elementary said they did not have the budget to install a proper ramp at the side entrance. And Donna had shown up to 2 school board meetings in a row, and then a third, speaking calmly and specifically and without backing down until they found the budget. She had figured out birthdays on a server's tips and Christmas on a payment plan, and a car repair on money she had not technically had yet. And 8 months ago, she had figured out the single most important thing Tyler had ever owned in his life: the wheelchair. It was not just a wheelchair. Dana hated when people called it that, the way they might refer to a folding chair shoved in the corner of a hospital corridor. This chair had cost $10,200, money that did not exist anywhere in Dana Mercer's world until she assembled it from 3 different places over 11 months. A settlement from a car accident 2 years earlier that she had been saving for a real emergency. A fundraiser her co-workers at Millie's Diner had organized in secret and presented to her on a Tuesday morning before her shift. A card signed by everyone, including the line cooks, which had made her cry in the parking lot for 10 minutes before she could compose herself enough to go inside. And a loan from her younger sister Gwen, who lived in Columbus and worked as a dental hygienist and had handed Dana an envelope without being asked, which Dana still felt a physical weight of guilt about every single time she thought of it. The chair had been built specifically for Tyler's body. His exact measurements, his exact condition, designed by a specialist at a medical equipment company in Cleveland who understood pediatric neuromuscular degeneration in a way that no standard model ever could. It had a tilt and recline system that took pressure off his spine during the long school day. It had a joystick control panel sized for his hand strength, which had been gradually decreasing, and calibrated to respond to the lightest possible touch. It had wheels engineered to handle cracked and uneven sidewalks without jarring his body apart at every seam in the pavement. It was not equipment, it was Tyler's legs. It was his independence. It was the difference between a boy trapped inside 4 walls, waiting for his mother to carry him from room to room, and a boy who could roll himself to the window in the morning to check if it was raining, roll himself to the kitchen table without asking for help, roll himself down the block to meet Marcus before the school bus came, and feel even briefly exactly like everyone else. Dana carried Tyler down the narrow hallway and through the living room and pushed open the heavy front door with her shoulder. The October air hit them both cool and sharp, smelling like exhaust and wet leaves and the faint chemical bite of the paint factory 3 blocks east that never quite went away no matter which direction the wind was blowing. She set Tyler down gently on the top porch step, his back against the iron railing, and crouched down to unlock the chain. They had chained the wheelchair to the porch railing every single night since the chair arrived. A heavy steel cable lock that Dana had spent 2 hours researching online after the chair was delivered, reading form after form written by parents of disabled children who talked about theft the way people talked about weather, like it was simply something that happened and you prepared for it as best you could. She had bought the heaviest gauge cable she could find at the hardware store on 5th Street and paid an extra $12 for a lock the packaging described as bolt cutter resistant. The lock fell apart in her hand, not the way it usually did, with the small, satisfying click of the key turning and the chain going slack. It simply fell. Both ends dropped away from each other, and Dana looked down and saw in the flat gray light of early morning that the cable had not been unlocked at all. It had been cut, a clean, smooth cut on both ends. The kind of cut that did not hesitate and did not care about subtlety. The kind of cut that just wanted through as fast as possible. Mom. Dana's hand was still wrapped around the severed cable. Her mind had not caught up yet. Her body was still operating on the assumption that this was a normal Tuesday morning in October, that any second now she would unlock the chair and lift Tyler into it and walk him to the corner of Alderman and 5th the way they did every single day without exception. Her eyes were looking at the empty patch of concrete where the chair had sat every night for 8 months, but her brain had not yet delivered the message. Mom, where are my wheels? Dana's head came up. She looked at the porch, at the faint rectangular outline in the old paint where the chair's footrests had rested night after night until the weight of them had left a permanent shadow on the wood. At the empty iron railing, at the broken cable coiled on the concrete like something shed and left behind. It has to be here, she said. Her voice came out wrong. Too high, not her own voice. It has to be. She stood up so fast the edges of her vision went briefly white. She turned in a full circle on the small porch, as though the chair might materialize if she looked in enough directions, as though this was a trick of the early light, as though any second she would see it knock sideways behind the railing or tucked against the building's brick face. It was not there. Mom. Tyler's voice had changed. He was 8 years old, and even at 8, he understood what an empty porch meant. He understood it faster than Dana wanted him to, faster than any child should have to understand anything before the school bus came. Mom, where are my wheels? And that was the sentence. That specific combination of 7 words spoken in her son's voice was the sentence that broke something loose in Dana Mercer's chest. Something that had been holding steady through 3 years of specialists and insurance calls and nights of doing math on a notepad at the kitchen table that never added up the way it needed to. Something that finally, right there on that cracked concrete porch at 11 minutes before 6 in the morning, gave way. She dropped to her knees in front of Tyler and took his face in both her hands. She could feel her hands shaking against his cheeks. Baby, she said, I don't know, someone took it. Someone cut the chain and they took it. Tyler's face did something that Dana would carry with her for a very long time. It was not crying, not at first. It was confusion, pure and absolute confusion. The expression of a child encountering a sentence that simply did not fit inside his understanding of the world. People did not steal wheelchairs. Why would anyone steal a wheelchair? What would a person even do with it afterward? But I need it, Tyler said quietly. Very quietly. The way you state something that is so obviously true, you cannot understand why you have to say it out loud. I need it to go places. I know, baby. How am I going to get to school? I'll carry you. I'll figure it out. How am I going to get to recess? How am I going to? His breath was coming faster now, the panic finally reaching him, his hands gripping the fabric of Dana's jacket sleeves. Mom, I can't walk anywhere without it. What if it's gone for good? What if nobody finds it? Somebody's going to find it, Dana said, and the words came out before she even believed them. The way that certain words come out of mothers, in moments like this one, automatic and absolute promising things they have no power to guarantee because the alternative is unthinkable. I'm calling the police right now. They're going to find whoever did this, and we're going to get your chair back. I promise you. She did not know yet how that promise was going to hold up. She carried Tyler back inside, settled him on the couch with the blanket from the back cushion because he was shaking now and dialed with fingers that would not quite cooperate. The dispatcher's voice was level and procedural, the voice of someone who had answered 10,000 calls that came in sounding exactly like this one. Ma'am, is this an emergency in progress? No, Dana said. But someone stole my son's wheelchair. It's a custom medical chair. It cost over $10,000. He cannot walk without it. I need someone to come right away. Okay, ma'am. I'm going to need you to calm down for me. Donna looked at Tyler on the couch, wrapped in his blanket, his wide eyes fixed on her face like she was the only solid thing left in a world that had just stopped making sense. I'm calm, she said. Please just send someone. We'll have an officer out to you within the hour. She thanked the dispatcher and hung up and sat down beside her son and pulled him into her lap, even though he was getting too big for it, even though her back was going to remind her of this decision later. Because right now, what Tyler needed was not logistics. He needed her arms around him, and he needed to hear her breathe. It's going to be okay, she said into his hair. I promise you, baby, it's going to be okay. She had no idea sitting there on that worn-out couch with her son trembling against her chest that this morning was only the very beginning of 8 days that would strip away nearly every piece of faith she had left in the systems that were supposed to protect people like them. And that the people who would eventually step in to save them would not be arriving in a squad car. Detective Roscoe Holt showed up at 7:27 in the morning, not the promised hour, 95 minutes after Dana's call. He was a heavy-set man, somewhere in his early 50s, with a face that had the sagging quality of someone who had been deeply tired for so long it had rearranged his features permanently. He climbed the porch steps slowly the way a man climbs stairs when his knees have filed a formal complaint and looked at the severed cable on the concrete without crouching down to examine it. This where it was chained up, he said. It was not really a question. Yes, Dana stood beside him with Tyler in her arms because there was nowhere else to put him now. Her arms were already burning. It's a custom chair, over $10,000. My son has a neuromuscular condition. He cannot walk. Holt wrote something on his notepad. Unhurried, cameras around here. No cameras. I already asked the neighbors. Nobody saw anything. It must have happened very late or very early. Right. Holt finally crouched, picked up one end of the cable, examined the cut, set it back down. Bolt cutters most likely. Fast job. Can you test it for fingerprints? Or Holt stood up slowly. There was something in his voice when he spoke again. Patient, the way adults are patient with children who do not yet understand how the world actually operates. I'm going to be straight with you, Ms. Mercer. We get calls like this in this part of town on a pretty regular basis. Bikes, generators, copper wire, catalytic converters. Anything with resale value eventually walks off a porch around here. 9 times out of 10, it ends up at a scrapyard within 24 hours stripped for parts. Dana felt something drain out of her face. Stripped for parts. It's a wheelchair. It's not. You'd be surprised what a motivated person will dismantle for $50. Aluminum frame, copper wiring, and the motorized components if it's a powered chair. It's powered. It has a tilt and recline system. There you go. Holt flipped his notepad closed. I'll file the report. I'm not going to mislead you and tell you we're going to have officers out here combing pawn shops for a wheelchair. The department simply does not have the manpower for that kind of follow-up on a property crime. This is not a property crime. Dana's voice rose despite every intention to keep it level. Tyler was listening to every word with his face pressed partway against her shoulder. This is my son's ability to leave this apartment. This is his independence. Do you understand what you are actually telling me right now? You are telling me nobody's going to look for it. I'm telling you the realistic odds. Holt's tone was not cruel. It was something worse than cruel. It was indifferent, the voice of a man who had filed 10,000 reports just like this one and watched 10,000 of them go nowhere and had made his peace with that fact so long ago, he could no longer locate where the peace ended and the numbness began. I'd rather be honest with you than make promises I can't keep. He has no other way to move, Dana said. I carry him to the bathroom. I carry him to school. I carry him everywhere now. Holt looked at Tyler for the first time, really looked at him. Something moved behind the detective's tired eyes. Something that might have been recognition. It did not change anything. I'm sorry, he said to Tyler, and it sounded almost genuine. Then to Dana, I'll do what I can on my end. Case numbers on this paper. You call that if anything surfaces. He handed her a small slip and walked back down the porch steps. His car was idling at the curb, and that was the full weight of the justice system's response to the worst morning of Dana Mercer's family's life. A case number on a piece of paper. A man who had already decided before he arrived. She watched the patrol car pull away down Alderman Street, taillights fading in the gray October morning, and she felt something harden in her chest. Not anger exactly, though anger was part of it. Something colder, something more specific, something that felt like a decision being made without her full permission. If nobody was going to look for Tyler's chair, then Donna was going to look for it herself. She called in sick to the diner that first day. The mechanics of their normal morning had collapsed without the chair, and she spent the first hours on the phone with the manufacturer in Cleveland, a patient and apologetic woman who explained that a chair built to Tyler's exact specifications could not simply be pulled from inventory. It would need to be rebuilt from scratch. 6 to 8 weeks. $10,200. Dana had $381 in her checking account. She hung up the phone and sat at the kitchen table for a long time without moving, feeling the walls of her life close in with a specificity they had never quite achieved before. Because in all the hard years since Tyler's diagnosis, there had always been a path forward, even when the path was brutal and exhausting and cost her things she could not afford to lose. There had always been a next step. Now there was a wall, a $10,000 wall with no door in it. She called the school. The principal, a careful and genuinely kind man named Davenport, said he could try to arrange a loaner chair from the district's equipment room. It would not be anything like Tyler's custom model. It might not fit properly, but it was something for the immediate term. Donna accepted it because something was better than nothing. Because Tyler needed to be in school, needed his routine, needed his friend Marcus at the bus stop and his seat by the window in Mrs. Galloway's classroom. Needed his life to keep moving even while the ground beneath it had just cracked open. She went back to work the next day because she had no choice. The diner did not offer paid sick leave and rent did not care about stolen wheelchairs. She took orders and refilled coffee and apologized to a table of contractors for being slow, and the whole time her mind was somewhere else entirely running. Calculations that never balanced, rehearsing conversations with insurance adjusters who had already said no, replaying the exact flat tone of Roscoe Holt's voice saying 9 times out of 10. That night, after Tyler was asleep fitfully restlessly, the loaner chair clearly causing him discomfort that showed even in the tension across his shoulders. While he slept, Dana sat at the kitchen table with a black marker and a stack of plain white paper. Stolen custom medical wheelchair, she wrote across the top in block letters. Below that, she wrote the brand name, the model, the color, the distinguishing features. She printed a photograph from her phone onto paper, a picture from Tyler's birthday in July. Tyler with his arms thrown over his head in a wide V of pure celebration, grinning so hard his eyes had nearly disappeared. She wrote the word reward underlined twice and her cell number repeated 4 times across the bottom so it could be torn off in strips. She made 200 copies at the 24-hour print shop on Washington Street, paid with money that was supposed to be for groceries, and the next morning before her shift she walked. She walked the entire industrial stretch of the neighborhood east and west, stapling flyers to telephone poles and taping them to bus shelter glass and sliding them under windshield wipers in parking lots. She walked into every pawn shop within 2 miles and asked the same question to the same range of blank or mildly irritated faces. She walked into the scrap yard on 5th Street and spoke to a man with engine grease worked permanently into the lines of his hands, who told her gently that chairs did come through, sometimes, but usually already taken apart, and he hadn't seen anything matching her description, but he would keep his eyes open. 6 hours of walking. By the time she got home, her feet had bled through her socks in 2 places, and Tyler asked her why she was limping, and Donna told him she had been on her feet all day at the diner because some lies are acts of protection, and this was one of them. By the end of that first week, she had covered half the city, posted in every community Facebook group she could locate, every neighborhood lost and found page, a city subreddit she had not known existed until she went searching for it at 2 in the morning. She stood outside the grocery store on Henderson Avenue and handed flyers directly to strangers, looking them in the eyes, saying the same sentence until it stopped sounding like words. He cannot get anywhere without it. Please, if you see anything, please call me. Most people took the flyer with the expression of someone who intends to do something about it and will forget before they reach their car. A few people stopped and actually looked at the photograph of Tyler grinning with his arms in the air, and Donna watched something move across those faces. Recognition. The understanding that this was not an abstraction, not a statistic, not a category of crime, but a specific little boy whose entire radius of movement had been folded up and taken away in the dark. But recognition did not bring the chair back. And as the days accumulated, Dana watched something settle over Tyler like a slow fog. A careful quality to the way he moved in the loaner chair, too cautious, too aware of how wrong it felt against his body, how the angle was slightly off in a way that the human spine registers before the mind does. It was on the 4th day that Tyler did something Dana had not expected. He had been sitting at the kitchen table after school, the loaner chair parked beside him, because its height made it difficult to get close enough to the table surface, and he had his laptop open, which he used with a specialized keyboard adapter that accommodated his grip strength. Dana had assumed he was doing homework or watching videos. She had been standing at the stove with her back to him. Mom, Tyler said, "Yeah. Do you remember the detective's name? The one who came to the porch?" Dana turned around. "Holt," she said slowly. "Roscoe Holt." Tyler nodded and went back to the keyboard. Dana watched him for a moment and then turned back to the stove. She thought he was probably looking up something about the case about stolen wheelchairs, the way curious 8-year-olds research things that are happening in their own lives. She did not think about it again until after Tyler was in bed that evening. She came to the kitchen to make tea and found a single sheet of paper on the kitchen table face up, placed precisely in the center where it could not be missed. It was a printout, a news article from the Millhaven Gazette's online archive dated October of 2021. The headline was small and local and buried the kind of story that appears once and disappears. A family on Prospect Street. A child with a respiratory condition that required powered medical equipment at home. A theft, a police report filed and not followed up on. An internal complaint lodged against a detective who had declined to investigate, citing limited departmental resources for property crimes. The complaint had been resolved internally. No disciplinary action taken. The detective's name was in the 3rd paragraph. Roscoe Holt. Dana stood at the kitchen table and read the article twice all the way through, standing with her coat still on, from coming in from checking the mail. Tyler had printed this and left it on the table for her to find. He had said nothing. He was 8 years old, and he had understood in the way that children sometimes understand things more clearly than the adults around them because they have not yet learned to work around what they know that this piece of information belonged to his mother. Dana read the article a third time. She set it back down in the center of the table face up where it had been. She did not move it. She did not put it in a drawer or fold it or tuck it somewhere out of sight. She left it right where Tyler had placed it because if someone came to this apartment and needed to understand what kind of detective had handled their case, she wanted them to be able to see that article without searching for it. She wanted it visible. She wanted it present. It was evidence, and Tyler had understood that before she had, and the least she could do was respect his placement of it. She made her tea and sat at the table for a long time, the article in front of her, turning over a shapeless and exhausted anger that had nowhere useful to go. On the seventh night, Tyler said the thing that broke the floor out from under her. Dana was tucking him in the October dark, pressing against the window. The loaner chair sat in the corner of his room, looking wrong in the way things look wrong when they are in a space they do not belong in, taking up room without earning it. Mom, Tyler said, "Yeah, baby. Do you think we're actually going to find it?" Dana sat on the edge of his bed, and for the first time in 7 days, she did not have the automatic response ready, the firm and certain yes she had been pulling out of herself every time Tyler asked a version of this question. The well was dry, and Tyler could read the hesitation on her face before she opened her mouth. "I don't know," she said. The words cost her something real to say. "I'm trying everything I can think of." "The loaner chair hurts my back," Tyler said. "And it's too slow. Marcus has to wait for me at recess, and I can tell he doesn't want to wait. He doesn't say anything. But I can tell." Dana felt something tear open behind her ribs. She kissed her son's forehead and told him to sleep. And then she walked to the kitchen and stood at the sink with both hands braced on the counter, staring at the dark window above the faucet, breathing through a wave of feeling so complete it nearly took her legs out from under her. She thought about Holt's tired face, about the case number she had called twice already, both times reaching a voicemail that never called her back. She thought about the insurance company, about the school district before they found the budget for the ramp, about the billing department at Riley's, about every system that was supposed to be there for families like hers and had found reasons efficient and bureaucratic and fundamentally indifferent not to be. The article Tyler had printed was still on the kitchen table where she had left it. She looked at it from across the room. At Holt's name in the third paragraph of a story about a different family in a different year who had been told the same essential thing in the same essential tone. And standing there in the quiet of her kitchen at 11:30 on the seventh night, she felt something inside her go cold and clear and absolutely resolved. She did not know what came next. She could not see it yet. She did not know that 3 days earlier, a tattered flyer soaked through by overnight rain and curling at its stapled corners on a telephone pole near Creston Avenue had already been photographed by a man named Colt Dixon as he walked out of a gas station with a pack of cigarettes in his hand. She did not know that Colt Dixon rode a motorcycle, that he belonged to a club, that less than a mile from where she was standing in a brick building with steel-reinforced doors and motorcycles lined up in rows along its gravel lot, a man named Walt Briggs was about to be handed a photograph of her flyer and would read it once fast and then read it again slowly, his jaw tightening with each line. All Dana knew, standing at that kitchen sink with the article about Roscoe Holt still on the table behind her, was that she had run out of doors to knock on. She just did not know yet that the right door had already found her flyer and was already deciding what to do about it. Colt Dixon was not the kind of man who stopped for things. He had been riding the same route home from the Sunoco on Creston Avenue for 6 years, past the same chain-link fences and boarded storefronts and telephone poles plastered with the usual debris of a neighborhood that had been slowly losing its argument with time. He noticed none of it anymore. It was the visual equivalent of white noise. But something made him stop on the evening of the 8th day. The flyer had been there for a while. He could tell by the way the paper had gone translucent with moisture, the edges curling back from the staple like something trying to peel itself free. The photograph in the center was still visible, though. A boy with his arms thrown over his head, grinning with his whole face sitting in a wheelchair that was clearly not standard equipment. Below the photograph, block letters that had bled slightly in the rain, but were still completely legible. Stolen custom medical wheelchair. Custom built. Cannot be replaced. Please call if you see anything. A phone number at this bottom, printed 4 times in terrible strips. 3 of the strips were still there. Colt stood on the sidewalk in the October evening and read the flyer twice. Then he took out his phone and photographed it. He stood there another moment looking at the boy's face, at the specificity of that grin, at the arms thrown up like the whole world was something to celebrate. Then he tucked his cigarettes into his vest pocket and walked back to his motorcycle and rode east toward the brick building on the edge of the industrial district, where the lights were usually still on past 10. Walt Briggs was at the long wooden table in the back room when Colt came in. He was going over maintenance logs for two of the bikes that needed work before winter reading glasses low on his nose, a mug of coffee at his elbow that had gone cold an hour ago. He did not look up when Colt set his phone down on the table in front of him. He looked at the screen. He read it once fast, then he read it again slower this time. His jaw tightened on the second pass, a small and very specific movement that the men who had ridden with Walt Briggs for any length of time knew meant something had gotten through the wall. He kept most things behind. "Kid can't walk," Colt said. "Saw this on the pole outside the Sunoco on Creston. It's been up a while, looks like. Staples are already rusting." Walt did not answer right away. He was still looking at the photograph of the boy. At that unguarded joy, the arms in the air, the grin that had not yet learned to hold anything back. Walt had a daughter in her 30s, now lived in Cincinnati with her husband and two kids. He saw at Thanksgiving, when the roads were good. He knew what that kind of smile looked like. And he knew with a precision that lived somewhere below conscious thought exactly what it looked like when the world started working on it. He set the phone down on the table. The sound of it was quiet, but it carried. $10,000 chair, Walt said. Custom built, and the number at the bottom is a personal cell, not a precinct line. She's doing this herself, Colt said, putting these up on telephone poles because nobody else will. Walt was quiet for another moment. He took off his reading glasses and set them on top of the maintenance logs. "Get everybody in here," he said. "Tonight." Colt looked at him. "Tonight. Tonight." Within the hour, the clubhouse had filled. Engines pulling into the gravel lot in ones and twos, headlights sweeping across the brick walls, men in leather vests coming through the steel door, with the quiet of people who had learned over many years that when Walt called a full meeting without advance notice, it was not about something small. 31 men settled around the long table and along the walls. The room went still in the way a room goes still when the people in it understand that what is about to be said will require something of them. Walt stood at the head of the table. Colt had connected his phone to the old projector they used for maps and route planning, and the flyer photograph filled the wall behind Walt. Tyler Mercer's face arms in the air, bigger than life. "This is Tyler Mercer," Walt said. 8 years old, neuromuscular condition, has had it since he was 3. His mother saved up for over a year to get him a custom chair built specifically for his body, $10,200. 8 days ago, somebody cut the chain off her front porch and took it. The room was completely silent. Police told her it was probably already scrapped, told her they didn't have the manpower to go looking for a stolen wheelchair. Walt let that sentence breathe. Let every man in the room feel the weight of what it meant for a family to be told that. She's been walking this neighborhood for a week, putting up flyers, going into pawn shops and scrap yards by herself, begging strangers outside the grocery store. He looked around the table. Not one official hand has been extended to help her. Rex Vaughn, seated near the middle of the table, a broad man with a gray beard and 22 years with Iron Road, did not phrase it as a question when he spoke. "We're helping her." Walt looked at him. "We're helping her." He looked at the rest of the room. "Tonight, I want this thing found before that boy wakes up tomorrow morning." "That's a tight window," somebody said from near the back. "I don't care how tight the window is." Walt's voice stayed level, which made it carry further than volume would have. "A kid has been without his legs for 8 days because somebody decided medical equipment on a porch was an easy score. We move tonight. Every scrapyard, every pawn shop, every fence who's done business within 50 miles of this building. Somebody knows something. Somebody always knows something." Chairs scraped back. Men were already pulling out phones, already breaking into groups, already falling into the rhythm of an organization that knew how to move. Walt held up one hand and the motion stopped. "One more thing." He looked around the room, meeting eyes. "We do this clean. We gather information. We don't make a mess that finds its way back to us. But I want it understood. Whoever took this chair is going to understand exactly what they took from that family and exactly who came to collect for it." A low sound moved through the room. Not applause, something quieter and more serious. The sound of men who had been waiting without quite knowing it for a reason that actually meant something. Before the groups organized and moved out, Rex Vaughn caught Walt alone near the side door. "There's something you're not saying," Rex said, "about why this one specifically." Walt looked at him for a moment. "Danny was 8, Walt said." Rex went still. "Different condition," Walt continued. "But the same kind of chair. He fell off his bike on the same street right there on Creston Avenue because the city never put a crosswalk where every parent on that block had been asking for one for 3 years. I fought them for 2 years after that, filed every form they asked for, went to every meeting." Walt stopped. "They thanked me for my concern and tabled it indefinitely." Rex said nothing. "Danny's been gone 9 years, Walt said, and I still drive a different route home because I can't look at that intersection." He pulled on his vest and picked up his helmet. "That boy in the photograph has been sitting in his apartment for 8 days because someone decided his freedom was worth less than a quick $50. And nobody with a badge has done one thing about it." He walked out through the side door without looking back. Walt arrived at Dana Mercer's building on Alderman Street at 11 in the evening with 4 members of Iron Road. They left the bikes at the curb, engines off. Walt had told them no formation, no theatrics, just 5 men standing on a sidewalk. The light was on in the second-floor apartment. Walt could see a figure move past the window. He took out his phone and typed a message to the number on the flyer. "Miss Mercer, we saw your flyer about your son's wheelchair. We're not here to cause trouble. We want to help find it. Can you come down for 2 minutes?" He watched the window. A minute passed. Then the figure in the window went still. Dana came to the door of the building 6 minutes later. She pushed it open and stepped onto the front stoop and stood there. She was wearing a gray diner uniform under an unzipped jacket, her phone in her right hand with her thumb positioned in a way that Walt recognized immediately as someone who had already decided where their finger was going if something felt wrong. She looked at the 4 men behind him and then looked at Walt. "I'm Dana," she said. Her voice was steady in a way that took effort. "It's my son's chair." Walt took off his sunglasses, even though it was dark, an old habit he had developed years ago when he wanted someone to be able to see his face clearly. "Name's Walt Briggs," he said. "We run the Iron Road chapter over on the east side. One of my guys found your flyer tonight on Creston Avenue." Dana looked at him, then at the men behind him, then at him again. "Why would you do this?" she said. "You don't know us." Walt heard the question underneath the question, which was not really about motivation, but about safety, about whether this was real or whether it was something else entirely. "Because somebody took something from a kid who already has it harder than most people will ever understand," Walt said. "And nobody who's supposed to help you bothered to. That doesn't sit right with me. Doesn't sit right with anybody who rides with me." Dana stood on the stoop for another moment. Then, and Walt would remember this later as the thing that surprised him most about Dana Mercer, she did not simply accept the help and step aside. "What can you actually do?" she said. "Specifically, that the police wouldn't." Walt looked at her. "We go places cops don't bother going," he said. "We talk to people cops don't bother talking to. Scrapyards that don't keep great records. Fences who move parts without paperwork. People who know what moves through this part of town and when. Then I'm going with you." Walt blinked. "That's not a good idea, Ms. Mercer." "It's my son's chair," Dana said. "And I've been doing this alone for 8 days. I know this neighborhood. I know the flyers I've put up and where. I know the details of that chair better than anyone." Her voice was completely level. "I'll follow you in my car if you'd rather I not ride with one of you." Walt studied her for a moment. There was a quality to Dana Mercer's stillness that he recognized, something he had seen in people who had been through a sustained kind of difficulty that burned away everything inessential and left only what was hardest. She was not performing bravery. She was simply done with the alternative. "You ride with Finn," Walt said finally. "You stay in the vehicle unless I say otherwise." Dana nodded once. She went back inside for 2 minutes and came back out with her jacket zipped and her keys in her hand. Walt understood without being told that she had looked in on Tyler and left a note somewhere Tyler would see it if he woke before she returned. They hit 3 scrapyards before midnight. The first 2 were straightforward. Owners who looked at the photograph on Rex's phone with the expression of people answering a question they have genuinely no reason to lie about and shook their heads no. The third yard was different. Lou Decker's operation sat on the western edge of the industrial district behind a chain-link fence with one panel that had collapsed inward and been propped back up with a length of 2x4. A single floodlight on a pole illuminated stacks of crushed metal and the scattered anatomy of vehicles in various stages of becoming smaller versions of themselves. Lou's office was a construction trailer with a dead plant in the window. He answered the door in his sweatpants, blinking against Rex's flashlight. "We're closed," Lou said automatically. Then he saw Walt. "Not asking if you're open," Rex said. He held up his phone with the photograph. "Custom wheelchair, stolen off a porch 8 days ago. You seen anything like it come through?" Lou's eyes went to the photograph, then away. "Too fast." "Nope, never seen it." Dana was sitting in the passenger seat of Finn's truck 20 feet away. Finn had his window down. He saw her lean forward slightly, her face close to the glass, looking past Lou into the trailer. She was scanning the shelves inside with the focused intensity of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for and had been looking for 8 days and had not given up. Then Dana was out of the truck. Walt saw it happen and did not stop her, partly because there was no time, and partly because something in the way she moved told him to wait. She walked past Rex and stood at the trailer window and looked through the glass. Lou started to turn around. "That's from Tyler's chair," Dana said. Everyone looked at her. She pointed through the glass. On the metal shelving unit inside the trailer, half covered by a piece of canvas tarp that had not been pulled quite far enough, was a component that meant nothing to most people in that parking lot. An armrest with a small control panel inset on its upper surface, a specific manufacturer's logo on the side in blue and gray. Dana had looked at that logo for 8 months. She knew its exact shape the way you know the face of someone you love. Lou looked at the armrest, looked at Walt, looked at Dana. "A guy came in 2 days ago," Lou said. "He said it was surplus from a hospital bed. Paid me cash to take it off his hands. I didn't ask for paperwork." Walt was very still. "What did he look like?" Lou described him quickly the way people describe things when they want to be done with a conversation. Thin, nervous, hadn't slept in a while the way a man looks when his body is running a debt it cannot pay. Drove a dark blue pickup truck, older model. Lou had the plate number in his log because Lou wrote down every plate, he explained, not quite meeting anyone's eyes just in case. 5 minutes later, Finn had a photograph of a handwritten entry in a spiral-bound ledger. A date, a dollar amount, a partial plate number, a physical description that matched exactly the profile of someone who needed fast cash and had not thought carefully about what he was taking from whom. Rex was already on his phone. "You still have the armrest," Walt said. Lou went inside and came back with it. Walt took it and turned it over in his hands. He found the sticker on the underside of the control panel housing. Small, a cartoon dinosaur green and grinning. Tyler Mercer had put it there himself, apparently, at some point in the 8 months he had owned this chair, pressing it into a spot where it would be visible to him when he operated the joystick, but not to anyone passing by. A private claim of ownership pressed into a piece of equipment that was supposed to be just equipment, but had never been just equipment. Walt handed the armrest to Dana without saying anything. Dana took it with both hands. She held it. She looked at the sticker. She did not cry. She just held the armrest against her chest for a moment, and then carefully set it on the seat of Finn's truck like it was something that needed to be handled correctly. 30 minutes later, Finn had run the partial plate through a contact and come back with a name. Nate Boone, 33 years old. Address on the south side of Millhaven, 2 miles from the scrapyard. Prior charges for petty theft and narcotics possession. The record of a man who had been circling a drain for a long time without quite going under. They drove to the house in 3 vehicles. It was a rental property that wore its neglect honestly. Grass that had stopped being cut sometime in August. A porch light that had burned out and never been replaced. Blinds angled shut in every window. Walt did not knock politely. He knocked the way you knock when you are serious about being answered. A light came on somewhere inside. A shadow crossed the blinds. Then there was the sound of someone moving quickly toward the back of the house. "Back's covered," Walt said into the radio on his vest. The reply came back in 4 seconds. "Copy. He's not getting out." The back door opened and banged against its frame. There was a brief commotion, the sound of a man who had committed to running and discovered immediately that running was not going to work. Then quiet. Walt pushed the front door open. It was unlocked. The deadbolt turned from the inside in the panic of someone who had stopped thinking clearly. He walked through the house at a pace that communicated certainty. Nate Boone was already on his couch when Walt reached the living room. Rex and another member named Gage stood on either side of him. Nate was thin in the way that was not about appetite. His hands were shaking with a tremor that had its own specific meaning. His eyes moved around the room with the darting quality of a man whose nervous system had been running at a frequency it was not built to sustain. Walt pulled a chair from the kitchen table, set it in front of Nate, and sat down. He did not speak immediately. He let the silence work. "You sold parts to Lou Decker 2 days ago," Walt said finally. "Off a kid's wheelchair you took 8 days ago." Nate's mouth opened. Walt held up one hand. "Don't," said quietly. "I already know more than you think I do. I have your plate number. I have a description. I have the armrest you sold loose sitting in a truck outside right now. So before you decide what to say next, I want you to understand that lying to me tonight is a considerably worse decision than telling me the truth." Nate closed his mouth. "Where's the rest of it?" Walt said. Finn had already moved to the back of the house. Walt heard the side door to the garage open, a silence. Then Finn's voice came through the door, quieter than usual. "Frame's here. Wheels are here. Seat assembly intact. The tilt mechanism is still connected. He hasn't gotten to most of it yet." Walt did not move. He kept his eyes on Nate Boone. "Nate said I didn't know it was a kid's chair. I swear to God I didn't know. I thought it was hospital equipment. Old surplus. I just saw the chain and it looked." He stopped. "It looked easy," Walt said. Nate did not answer, which was its own answer. Rex had been moving quietly around the edges of the room, and now he set something on the coffee table between Walt and Nate, a piece of paper folded in thirds. Rex had found it in the kitchen drawer under a stack of takeout menus. Walt looked at it without touching it. It was a form, a voluntary enrollment application for an inpatient substance treatment program at the Fort Wayne Recovery Center 40 miles north. The form was filled out completely, every field in handwriting that got slightly more careful toward the end, as though the person writing it was trying to do it right. At the bottom, a signature line, signed, and next to the signature a date, the same date the wheelchair was stolen. Walt looked at the form for a long time. Nate was staring at it too. "I needed $40 for the bus," Nate said. His voice had changed. The defensive quality had gone out of it, and what was left was something raw and less protected. "The clinic is in Fort Wayne. I didn't have bus fare. I was going to go that morning. I had the form filled out. I just needed $40. He stopped. "I thought it was old hospital surplus. I didn't know it was a kid's." Walt looked at the enrollment form for another moment. Then he looked at Nate Boone, at the shaking hands and the hollowed face and the ruins of whatever Nate Boone had originally been before whatever had gotten its hooks in him had done its long, slow work. "An 8-year-old boy," Walt said, "has been without his legs for 8 days because you needed bus fare. His mother has been walking this neighborhood until her feet bled. She's been making flyers by hand and putting them on telephone poles because the police told her to give up. That boy asked his mother if she thought they were ever going to find his chair." Walt paused. She didn't have an answer for him. Nate covered his face with his hands. "Where's the truck?" Walt said. "Street. Out front." Rex went out. Walt heard the truck's driver's side door open. Walt stood up. He looked down at Nate. "The rest of this night goes one of two ways." Walt said, "You tell me right now if there's any other part of that chair not in the garage and we take it and we leave, and you have a conversation with yourself tonight about that form on the coffee table. Or this goes differently." 10 seconds. "It's all in the garage," Nate said. "Every other piece. I was going to bring the rest to Lou's tomorrow. I hadn't been able to do it yet." He said that last part quietly, like he was admitting something to himself. Walt picked up the enrollment form from the coffee table. He looked at it one more time. He set it back in front of Nate. Then he turned and walked to the garage. Finn had laid everything out on the garage floor under the overhead light. The main frame, both rear wheels and the front casters. The seat assembly with its pressure relief cushioning system. The tilt mechanism still fully connected to its mounting bracket. The joystick control housing that had been disconnected but not damaged. The headrest, which had a small cartoon dinosaur sticker pressed into its left corner. Walt crouched down and looked at the headrest for a moment. Then he looked at Finn. "How bad is it?" Walt said. Finn was already examining the frame joints with a small flashlight. The armrest disconnect was clean. No damage to the wiring harness. Mainframe is intact. The tilt mechanism looks good. Finn ran his hand along the seat mount. "Give me until morning. I can have this working exactly the way it's supposed to work." Walt stood up. "Use the garage at the clubhouse." He looked at the assembled components on the floor. "Every piece. Make sure it's right." Finn nodded once and began carefully loading the frame into the bed of the club's truck, with the deliberate care of a man handling something that matters. Walt walked back through the house. Nate Boone was still on the couch, the enrollment form on the coffee table in front of him. He looked up when Walt came back through. Walt stopped. He reached into the inside pocket of his vest and took out a folded piece of paper. He set it on the coffee table next to the enrollment form. It was a handwritten address. The Fort Wayne Recovery Center, the same facility named on the enrollment form with a specific name written below it. A man named Gerald Pruitt, who had ridden with Iron Road for 6 years before he got sober and retrained and now ran the intake program at that facility. Walt did not explain what it was. Nate could read. "Your truck's being taken," Walt said. "That's for the family. Consider it settled." He looked at the 2 pieces of paper on the table. The enrollment form Nate had filled out with such careful handwriting. The address Walt had just placed beside it. "The other piece of paper is up to you," Walt said. "Nobody's going to make that call for you." He walked out of the house and did not look back. Dana was standing beside Finn's truck in the street. She had watched the components being loaded, had watched the headrest come out of the garage with the sticker she recognized from 10 feet away, and she had not moved or spoken while any of it happened. She had simply stood there, with her arms wrapped around herself against the October cold, watching. When Walt came out of the house, she looked at him. "Is it all there?" she said. "Finn's going to have it rebuilt by morning," Walt said. "Everything that was taken apart is accounted for." He looked at her directly. "It's going to work exactly the way it's supposed to work." Dana pressed her lips together. She looked at the truck where the components were now secured under a tarp. Walt took out his phone and looked at the time. It was 2:47 in the morning. "Go home," he said. "Get a few hours if you can." He looked at her steadily. "I'll call you when it's ready to bring to you." Dana looked at him for a long moment. "He's going to ask me tomorrow morning who found it," she said. "Tyler. He's going to ask me who actually found his chair." Walt waited. "I don't know how to explain this to him," Dana said. "I don't know what words to use." Walt thought about that for a moment. "Tell him some people heard about what happened and decided it wasn't right," he said. "Tell him they went looking because nobody else did." Dana nodded slowly. She got back into Finn's truck for the ride home. Walt watched the truck pull away down the street and then stood alone in front of Nate Boone's house in the October dark, looking up at the sky over Millhaven, which was orange and low, the way city skies are when they are bouncing everything back at you. He thought about a crosswalk on Creston Avenue that still did not have painted lines on it. He thought about a boy with his arms in the air. Then he walked back to his bike and rode east toward the brick building where Finn was already pulling into the garage with the components of a wheelchair that needed to be made whole again before morning. Finn worked through the night without stopping. The garage at the Iron Road Clubhouse was lit by 4 overhead fluorescents and a portable work lamp. Finn had angled specifically at the chair's tilt mechanism, which required the most careful attention of everything that had been disconnected. He laid the components out on a clean tarp on the floor, in the order he intended to reassemble them the way a surgeon lays out instruments before an operation. Everything in its place, nothing left to chance. He reconnected the armrest wiring harness first, working slowly, checking each connection twice before moving to the next. Then the seat assembly, the pressure relief cushioning system, the lateral supports that had been calibrated to Tyler Mercer's exact hip measurements by a specialist in Cleveland. The tilt mechanism took 40 minutes on its own. Finn tested it manually before reconnecting the motor, running it through its full range of motion by hand, feeling for any resistance or misalignment that might have come from the disconnection. There was none. The wheel alignment took another 30 minutes. Finn used a calibration tool from the back of his toolbox, a long steel straight edge he had bought years ago for motorcycle framework and had never thought he would use for anything like this. He trued both rear wheels and checked the front casters, adjusted the toe angle by 2 degrees on the left side where the concrete had left a faint wear mark. He connected the joystick control panel last, ran the diagnostic sequence the manufacturer had built into the system, a series of small motor activations that checked each drive component in sequence. Everything responded. Everything worked. Finn sat back on his heels and looked at the chair under the work lamp. It looked exactly like it had looked in the photograph on the flyer. The same color, the same profile, the same small green dinosaur sticker pressed into the left corner of the headrest, grinning its cartoon grin at whoever was sitting in the chair. Finn had been with Iron Road for 11 years. He had rebuilt engines and repaired frames and done things in garages at odd hours that he would not discuss in other settings. He was not a man who was easily moved by things. He sat on the floor of the clubhouse garage at 6 in the morning and looked at a repaired wheelchair and felt something he could not immediately name settle into his chest, like something returning to where it belonged. He called Walt. "It's done," Finn said. "Tested everything twice, tilt works. Wheels are true, control panel is responsive." He paused one beat, stickers still on the headrest. "Good," Walt said. "Get it loaded. We move in 45 minutes. By the time Walt came back into the garage, more men had arrived, drawn by word that had moved through the chapter with the speed of something that matters. 3 members who had been on a run 2 counties over had turned around when Colt called them after midnight, arriving at the clubhouse at 4 in the morning and sleeping on the clubhouse couches for 2 hours before Walt came in. By the time the bikes lined up in the gravel lot as the sun came up, there were 34 of them. Rex Vaughn was leaning against his bike when Walt came out. "How many?" Walt said. 34, Rex said. "Counting you and Finn. 3 more came in after midnight when word reached them. Decker, Pruitt, and Mills. They'd been on a run 2 counties over and turned around when Colt called." Walt looked at the line of motorcycles along the gravel lot. The sky to the east was coming apart in cold bands of orange and pale gray, the light of an October morning that arrives looking like it has somewhere important to be. He thought about Dana Mercer standing at her kitchen sink the previous night, her hands pressed flat against the cold counter, having run out of doors to knock on. He thought about a telephone pole on Creston Avenue and a flyer that had been there long enough for its staples to rust. "Let's go," Walt said. Dana had not gone back to sleep after Walt's call. She had sat at the kitchen table for a while with her hands around a mug of tea. She did not drink. Watching the window lighten from black to gray to the pale specific blue of an Indiana October morning. The article Tyler had printed was still on the table where she had left it, face up in the center. She looked at it and then looked at the window and then looked at her hands. Then she went into Tyler's room and sat on the edge of his bed and watched him sleep for several minutes the way she had done every morning for 8 years, checking the steady rise and fall of his chest, listening to him breathe. Then she put her hand gently on his shoulder. "Tyler," she said softly, "baby, wake up." Tyler's eyes opened. He blinked at the ceiling. His shoulders still carried the slight defensive hunch he had developed over the past 8 days from the loaner chair, a posture his body had adopted to manage the low-grade discomfort of equipment that did not fit him. "It's early," Tyler said. "I know." Dana brushed the hair from his forehead. "I need you to listen to me for a second, okay? I need you to not get too excited yet because it's not here yet." But she stopped. She had been rehearsing this since Walt's call and still could not find the version of it that felt equal to what was actually happening. "Baby," she said, "I think your chair is coming home this morning." Tyler went completely still. The stillness of a child who has learned over 8 days to be careful with hope, who has had the experience of hoping and then lying awake with that hope pressing against his ribs and finding nothing on the other side of it. "Really," he said, "really. People found it. They found who took it, and they found the chair, and they fixed it, and they're bringing it here this morning." Tyler looked at her. "Did the police find it?" Dana took a slow breath. "No," she said. "Some other people. They heard about what happened, and they decided it wasn't right. So they went looking because nobody else would." Tyler considered this with the gravity that children apply to information that does not fit the shapes they have been given for understanding the world. "Like superheroes," he said. Dana laughed. It came out watery and exhausted and more relieved than she had words for. "Something like that," she said. "Yeah." Tyler sat up as straight as his body would allow. "I want to get dressed," he said. "I want to look okay when they come." "Of course, baby." She helped him into a clean shirt, his good jeans, the gray hoodie he saved for days that mattered. His hands were trembling slightly, not from his condition, but from something else entirely, the physical expression of a feeling too large for an 8-year-old body to contain, without some of it leaking out around the edges. They were on the porch when the sound came. Not a single engine. Not 2 or 3. A sound that built from somewhere down the length of Alderman Street, rolling toward them in a wave that Dana felt in her chest before she could identify what it was. A deep, layered, continuous rumble that grew and did not stop growing. "Mom," Tyler said. His voice was very quiet. Dana had her arms around him from behind, holding him upright on the porch step. She felt him go rigid with listening. "I hear them," she said. "I hear them coming." The first motorcycle came around the corner of Alderman and 5th, and then there was another behind it, and another behind that, and they kept coming in a formation so deliberate and unhurried, it looked almost choreographed. Chrome catching the early morning light engines dropping into a lower idle as they turned onto the block and began to fill the curb along the front of the building. Doors were opening up and down the street, neighbors in robes and work clothes stepping onto their stoops, drawn by a sound that did not belong to this block on a Thursday morning. An older woman across the street stood with both hands over her mouth. A man 2 doors down watched from his front steps with his coffee cup forgotten in his hand. 34 motorcycles lined the cracked curb in front of Dana Mercer's building, engines settling into idle and then going quiet one by one until the street was filled with a silence that felt larger than the sound that had preceded it. Tyler, Dana said softly, "Look." Walt Briggs was stepping down from the cab of the club's truck. He walked to the truck bed without hurrying and reached in with both hands and lifted Tyler Mercer's wheelchair out with the careful deliberateness of a man who understood exactly what he was carrying. Not the deliberateness of someone afraid of dropping something. The deliberateness of someone who knows that some things deserve to be handled with a specific kind of attention. He carried it to the foot of the porch steps. Dana came down the steps with Tyler in her arms and stopped at the bottom. She and Walt looked at each other for a moment over the chair between them. Walt set it down on the concrete at the base of the steps and stepped back. Dana lowered Tyler into the seat. It took 3 seconds. The way it always had. His body recognized it before his mind did, settling into the custom contours of the seat cushion, the lateral supports finding their positions against his hips, the headrest meeting the back of his head at exactly the angle it had been calibrated for. Not close, not approximate, exactly right. Dana watched his shoulders drop half an inch as 8 days of accumulated tension released from muscles that had been compensating for equipment that did not fit. Tyler looked down at the joystick. He put his hand on it. He gave it the lightest possible push. The chair moved forward across the concrete, smooth and immediate and perfectly responsive 4 feet in the direction he intended, stopping exactly where he wanted it to stop. Tyler sat very still for a moment. Then he looked up at the 34 men standing along the curb in front of his building, men in leather vests with patches and pins, and the weathered quality of people who've spent a lot of years outdoors in all kinds of weather. And his face broke open into a smile so wide and so total and so completely undefended that several of those men, without discussion or coordination, looked away or looked down or suddenly became very interested in something on the ground near their boots. "That's it," Tyler said. "Mom, that's really it." "It's really it, baby." "Is the dinosaur sticker still on?" Walt crouched down to Tyler's eye level, which required significant effort for a man of his size, and the stiffness that came with being 56 in October. He reached around and touched the corner of the headrest. "Right where you left it," Walt said. "Wouldn't have brought it back any other way." Tyler looked at him. "Thank you," Tyler said. He said it simply without preamble or performance, the way children say things when they mean them completely. "Thank you. I missed it so much. I didn't think." He stopped. "I didn't think it was coming back," Tyler said. Walt looked at the boy in front of him. 8 years old, dark blonde hair, a smile still breaking across his face even through whatever he was feeling. The same age Danny had been. The same age Danny would always be. "Nobody should ever be able to take this away from you in the first place," Walt said. "We just made sure that mistake got fixed." Tyler thought about this with the seriousness of someone working through a complex problem. "Did you find who took it?" "We found him." "Is he going to do it again?" Walt glanced at Dana briefly, an exchange between adults over a child's head. "No," Walt said. "He's not going to do that again. Not to you, not to anybody else." Tyler nodded, considering. "Okay," he said. Then with a small adjustment of the joystick, he rolled himself in a slow, deliberate circle on the concrete, testing the chair's response, reacquainting himself with the specific feedback of his own equipment after 8 days with something that had never been his. He completed the circle and stopped facing Walt. "It works exactly the same," Tyler said. "That's exactly how it should work," Walt said. He stood up slowly, his knees registering their opinion, and looked at Dana. Dana was watching her son roll himself back and forth across the front of the building in small, precise movements, nothing showy, just a boy relearning the specific pleasure of going exactly where he intended without asking anyone's permission or waiting for anyone's help. She pressed both hands against her mouth for a moment. Then she lowered them. "I don't know how to do this," she said. "I don't know how to thank people for something this size." "You already did it," Walt said. "You didn't give up. You put up 200 flyers and walked until your feet bled and kept going when the police told you to quit and kept going when Tyler asked you if you thought you'd ever find it and you didn't have an answer." That's what brought us to you. Dana shook her head slightly. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice, Walt said. Plenty of people in your situation would have made a different one. He looked at her evenly. You didn't. It was Colt Dixon who stepped forward with the envelope. He held it out to Dana without ceremony, the way you hand someone something when you want the gesture to speak for itself. Dana took it. She felt the weight of it, then she opened the flap. The bills inside were neatly arranged mixed denominations, the aggregate of what 34 men had reached into their pockets and contributed without being asked to contribute a specific amount. The kind of collection that reflects what people actually have rather than what would look impressive. What is this, Dana said. Her voice had gone careful. Word got around the chapter last night, Colt said, about what happened to your family. Everybody chipped in something. Dana looked at the money, then at Tyler still rolling measured circles on the concrete, then back at Walt. I can't take this, she said. You've already done so much. You're going to take it, Walt said. Not unkindly, but with the flat certainty he used for things that were settled. A mother shouldn't have to choose between her rent and her son's medical equipment. And she shouldn't have spent a week walking this neighborhood alone because the people whose job it was to help her decided it wasn't worth their time. Dana held the envelope for a long moment. Then she pressed it against her chest and looked away at the street, at the line of bikes along the curb, at the October morning that had arrived clear and cold, and entirely different from the morning 8 days ago when she had found a cut chain and an empty porch. Thank you, she said. It came out barely above a whisper. It was at that moment, with Dana holding the envelope and Tyler completing another slow circle, and 34 men standing in the quiet that follows something being finished, that a sedan came around the corner of Alderman and Fifth and slowed. Detective Roscoe Holt pulled to a stop 20 feet behind the last motorcycle in the line. He got out of his car slowly with the instinctive caution of a man who has spent 30 years walking into situations he did not fully understand yet. His hand moved toward his hip by reflex and then stopped when his eyes processed what was in front of him. He stood beside his car for a moment and looked at the scene. 34 men in leather vests lined along the cracked curb. A woman on the front porch of an apartment building, holding an envelope against her chest, her eyes wet. A boy in a wheelchair rolling in slow, joyful circles on the concrete below the porch steps, his face incandescent with something that was not complicated and did not need to be. Holt had received a call 40 minutes ago from a contact at a scrapyard on the west side. Something about an overnight visit from Iron Road. Something about a man named Nate Boone turning up at the urgent care on Jefferson Street in the early morning hours. And somewhere in that report, the name tied to a wheelchair theft case that Holt himself had handled 9 days ago and never entered into the system. He had come expecting to find some version of what his entire professional framework had trained him to associate with this many Iron Road vests in one place before 8 in the morning. He had not expected this. He walked forward. Walt turned when he heard the footsteps on the sidewalk and saw Holt coming. He did not change his expression or his posture. He simply waited. Detective Walt said, when Holt was close enough. Holt stopped a few feet away. His eyes moved from Walt to Dana to Tyler and back. What's going on here, Holt said. Tyler's chair came home, Walt said. His voice was entirely neutral. Holt looked at the wheelchair, at Tyler, who had noticed the new arrival and stopped his circles to watch with the open curiosity of an 8-year-old who had not yet learned to find uniformed authority figures anything other than interesting. Holt looked at the severed cable that still lay coiled near the porch railing, where it had been since Tuesday morning, 9 days ago, when he had looked at it for 45 seconds and decided it was not worth crouching down to examine more closely. I got a call this morning, Holt said, about some activity last night, a yard on the west side. A man named Boone at urgent care. Walt said nothing. I need to understand what happened here, Holt said. If there was an assault, you never filed the report. It was Dana's voice, quiet and completely level. Holt looked at her. The case number you gave me, Dana said. I called it twice, left 2 voicemails. No one called back. The number didn't exist in the public case tracking system. She paused. Tyler found the article from 2021, the complaint about the family on Prospect Street. He printed it out for me, left it on the kitchen table so I would see it when I came in. The color moved in Holt's face. He knew the article. He had not read it in 3 years, but he knew it existed the way you know about something you have chosen not to revisit. A family on Prospect Street, a complaint, an internal resolution, a notation that the matter was considered closed. There was a long silence on Alderman Street. "I should have done more," Holt said. The words came out stiffly, like they had been stored somewhere uncomfortable, and took effort to retrieve. "I know that." Dana looked at him. "8 days," she said. "Not with any particular heat, just as a fact. They did in one night what you told me couldn't be done." Holt had nothing to say to that. Walt said, "I want to ask you something, detective. One question." Holt looked at him. "In 8 days," Walt said, "who actually helped this family?" The question set in the morning air. Holt looked at Tyler Mercer, who was watching the conversation from his wheelchair, with his hands resting lightly on the joystick, his face showing the alert interest of a child following an adult exchange he mostly understands. Tyler looked back at Holt with an expression that held no animosity and no performance, just attention. "I'm sorry, kid," Holt said. "It came out the same way it had 9 days ago on the same porch, and this time, too, it sounded almost genuine, except that this time Holt seemed to feel the full weight of what those two words did not and could not cover." Tyler regarded the detective for a moment. "It's okay," Tyler said. "They found it. 3 words. No accusation, no forgiveness required, because an 8-year-old boy was not responsible for providing absolution to a 53-year-old detective who had decided a stolen wheelchair was not worth his time. Just a simple factual statement about what had happened, delivered with the clear eyes of a child who had been given his chair back and had not yet learned to complicate that with everything surrounding it." Holt nodded slowly. He looked at Walt one more time. "The man you're asking about," Holt said. "Nate Boone." "Alive," Walt said. "Not harmed. He understands what he took and why it mattered. He's not going to trouble this family again." Holt absorbed this. He stood there. The case number he had never filed. The family on Prospect Street in 2021. The cut chain he had examined for 45 seconds. The voicemails he had not returned. He was 11 months from retirement. He had been telling himself for 2 years that the last stretch was just about getting through, about the low investment caution that comes from being close enough to the end to see it clearly. He did not have a category for what he was looking at. He got back in his car. He sat behind the wheel for a long time without starting the engine. Long enough that the last of the motorcycle engines had fired up, and the line of iron road bikes had begun pulling away from the curb one by one, the low, low rolling sound of them receding down Alderman Street. Long enough that Dana had settled Tyler back on the porch and was sitting on the top step beside him, the wheelchair parked next to them in the morning light. Holt looked at the wheelchair through his windshield. He looked at Tyler's face. Then he started the car and drove back to the precinct. He sat at his desk for 20 minutes before he opened the case management system. He navigated to new entry. He typed in the case number he had given Dana Mercer 9 days ago, which had never been entered. He filled in the fields. Victim name, date of incident, property description. He put in Nate Boone's name and address under suspect information. Under case status, he typed resolved. Then he sat there with his hand on the mouse and typed one more thing in the notes field. Resolution by other means, he typed. Property recovered intact. Family made whole. He stared at what he had written. Then he opened a different folder in the system. An older one. He typed a name into the search field. A family on Prospect Street. A complaint filed in October of 2021. The complaint had been resolved internally. No disciplinary action. A notation that the detective had been counseled and the matter was considered closed. Holt read the whole file. It took 7 minutes. He read every page, including the mother's written statement, which he had apparently never actually read before, or had read so quickly. It had left no impression on anything that mattered. He finished. He sat with his hands flat on the desk. Then he opened a new document and began to type. He did not know exactly what he was writing yet, but he had started, which was more than he had done the last time. The Iron Road motorcycles did not linger long after Holt drove away. There was no ceremony about the departure. The men who had ridden to Alderman Street had done what they came to do, and they understood that the morning belonged to Donna and Tyler now, not to them. One by one, they started their engines, the sound building, and then receding as they pulled into the street and rode east toward the brick building with the steel door and the gravel lot back toward whatever the rest of a Thursday morning held for them. Walt was the last to mount up. He stood on the sidewalk in front of the building and looked up at the porch where Dana sat with Tyler beside her, Tyler's hands resting on the joystick of his chair, with the easy familiarity of someone reacquainting themselves with something that has always been theirs. "If anyone gives you trouble," Walt said. "Anyone. You call the number Colt gave you last night." Dana nodded. "We don't forget the people we help," Walt said. That's just how it works. He looked at Tyler. You take care of that chair, he said. It's yours. Nobody gets to decide otherwise. I will, Tyler said. He paused. Are you going to come back sometime? Just to visit. Walt considered this. Maybe we'll ride by sometime, he said. See how you're doing. Tyler seemed to find this satisfactory. Walt pulled on his helmet and swung his leg over the bike and started the engine, and Dana watched him pull away from the curb and ride east down Alderman Street until the sound of the engine blended with the sound of the city waking up and then was gone. She sat on the porch step with her arm around Tyler for a long time after that. Tyler was not still. He was moving the chair in the small, incremental adjustments, testing the response of the joystick, rediscovering the calibration of a piece of equipment that knew him, that had been built around the specific measurements of his body by someone who had spent 3 hours getting them exactly right. He rolled 2 feet forward and came back. He adjusted the tilt angle by the smallest possible increment and felt the difference in how his spine settled. He turned the chair in a tight circle and then straightened and stopped exactly where he wanted to stop. Mom, Tyler said. Yeah, it feels exactly the same. Dana pressed her lips together. It feels perfect, Tyler said, like it never left. Dana pulled him against her side. She felt the solid frame of the chair under her arm, the familiar hum of its motor at idle, the weight of her son leaning slightly into her. Like it never left, she said. That's exactly how it should feel. They stayed on the porch together as the October morning opened up around them. The light coming through, clear and cold, the street quiet now except for the ordinary sounds of a neighborhood going about its day. A garbage truck somewhere on the next block. A screen door. A car radio fading past and gone. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, Dana stood at the kitchen window and watched Tyler in the small, fenced yard behind the building. He was racing Marcus, the neighbor boy who was his age and had been his bus stop companion since first grade, across the length of the yard and back. Marcus ran. Tyler drove. The contest was not particularly fair in either direction, which was exactly the point, and both of them were laughing hard enough that Dana could hear it through the closed window. The money from Iron Road had covered 3 months of rent and refilled the emergency fund Donna had been drawing down through 8 days of missed work and extra expenses. Her sister Gwen, when Dana called to tell her what had happened, had cried for 10 minutes and then made Dana promise to call her if anything like this ever came close to happening again. Dana had promised and meant it. The school district loaner chair had gone back the Monday after the wheelchair came home. Tyler's teacher, Mrs. Galloway, had sent a note home with Tyler that same week. 2 sentences. We noticed Tyler seemed like himself again today. We're glad. Finn had come by the following week without calling, first carrying a small toolkit, and spent 20 minutes on the living room floor checking the calibration and testing every connection. He refused coffee. He refused everything. He just worked and said it was good and left. Dana had watched him go and thought about what it meant when people do a thing correctly, not because anyone is watching, but because it needs to be done correctly. Detective Roscoe Holt had not returned to Alderman Street, but a neighbor had mentioned seeing a sedan drive slowly past the building twice in the past 3 weeks, slowing near the front porch, then continuing on. Dana did not know what to make of that. She had decided she did not need to make anything of it. Some things could be left incomplete without that incompleteness being a problem. She thought sometimes about Nate Boone and the enrollment form in the kitchen drawer and the address Walt had placed on the coffee table without explanation. She hoped he had used it. She found she could hold, not knowing without it pulling at her the way she might have expected. She had spent everything she had on 8 days of searching, and when the chair came back, there was nothing left over for sustained anger at the person who took it. Only an enormous and exhausted relief. And somewhere underneath the relief, very quiet, the knowledge that the address Walt had left might be the most useful thing that had happened in Nate Boone's life in a long time. Dana's phone rang on the counter. She answered on the second ring. Miss Mercer, Walt said. His voice was the same as she remembered. Level. Unhurried. Walt? Hi. How's Tyler doing? He's outside right now, Dana said. Racing the neighbor kid. She watched through the window. He's winning. Good, Walt said. That's how it should be. A pause. I'm calling because there's a situation I wanted to ask you about. Woman named Willa Garner, 71 years old, lives in Hartfield, about 40 miles east of you. A contractor came to fix her roof last spring, took $47,000 from her, and left a tarp nailed over a hole where her chimney used to be. Police say there's not enough documentation for charges. Guy moved his business to a different county. Dana watched Tyler corner hard at the fence line, the chair responding instantly, Marcus skidding to reverse direction. "What do you need from me?" she said. "Just to talk to her," Walt said, "not about details, just about what it feels like when things look completely closed off and then something changes. About not giving up when the official answer is no." Dana thought about a telephone pole on Creston Avenue, about 200 flyers and bleeding feet, and standing outside a grocery store handing paper to strangers until the words stopped sounding like words. "Yeah," she said. "Give her my number. Tell her to call whenever she's ready." "Appreciate it," Walt said. "How are you holding up otherwise?" "Better," Dana said. She watched Tyler raise one hand off the joystick in a brief arc of triumph as Marcus fell half a step behind. "We're better." After she hung up, she stayed at the window for a while, watching her son move through the yard in the afternoon light. He had stopped racing and was doing something more deliberate now, navigating around the uneven patches of the yard, the places where the concrete had heaved and settled over the years into small rises and dips. He took each one carefully, adjusting his approach angle, learning the terrain the way you learn anything you intend to know well. She thought about Willa Garner in Hartfield, 71 years old, a tarp over a hole where her chimney used to be. The official answer is no. She thought about the family on Prospect Street in 2021, a woman named Carol Briley, whose statement Holt had apparently never read, a woman who had fought a similar fight and lost it and had never received any kind of follow-up from anyone. Dana had been thinking about writing her a letter, not to say anything specific, just to say that someone had read her statement and was thinking about her. Tyler had come back across the yard to the base of the building and was looking up at the window, his hand raised. "Come out, Mom," Tyler called through the glass. "Come see how fast I can go in the back corner." Finn adjusted something on the left wheel, and now I'm even faster than before. Dana was already reaching for her jacket. She went down the back stairs and out through the building's rear door into the October afternoon, the air clean and cold, the light coming through the gap between the buildings at the low particular angle that happens in late October, the light that makes everything it touches look specific and real and worth noticing. Tyler was already moving, rolling toward the far corner of the yard with the focused expression of someone who has a route planned and knows exactly what they are going to do with it. "Watch this," he said. He navigated the concrete rise by the old garden bed, found the smooth patch beyond. It opened up the joystick to full and crossed the full length of the yard with a speed that made Marcus whoop from the fence line where he was catching his breath. Tyler came to a clean stop at the far end and turned around. His face held something that Dana did not have a single word for. Something assembled from speed and October light and the physical fact of going exactly where he wanted to go, of a body that had been given back what it needed to move through the world on its own terms. Dana stood in the yard and watched her son and felt the weight of 8 days lift away from her the rest of the way. Some debts she had come to understand were not paid by the people who owed them. Some were paid by strangers who had looked at a faded flyer on a telephone pole on an October night and decided for their own reasons that what it described was not something they could ride past. She did not entirely understand those reasons. She understood part of them, the part Walt had told her in a name tattooed on her wrist, a boy who was 8 years old and always would be, and a crosswalk on Creston Avenue that still had no painted lines. But she suspected there were other parts different for each of the 34 men who had come down her street that morning that she would never know and did not need to. What she knew was this: her son was moving through the afternoon light on his own terms, fast enough to make an 8-year-old boy run to keep up with him. The chair worked exactly the way it was supposed to work. The dinosaur sticker was still on the headrest, exactly where Tyler had put it 8 months ago, a small green grin that had survived everything that had been done to try to unmake it. And on a bulletin board inside a brick building on the east side of Millhaven, Indiana, 2 new flyers had been pinned by men who had started looking for exactly this kind of fight. Nobody had told them to put those flyers there. Nobody had issued a directive or held a vote. They had looked at a bulletin board that had once held a photograph of a boy with his arms in the air and had understood without needing it explained that this was something that could happen more than once if people were paying attention. So they had started paying attention. Walt had seen the flyers when he walked past the board that morning. He had stopped and read both of them all the way through. Then he had continued to the kitchen to get his coffee. Tyler had come rolling back across the yard toward Dana, building speed on the smooth stretch near the center, and stopped beside her with a precision that made it look easy. "I want to go around again," he said, "but faster this time. Will you time me?" Dana looked at her son, at the face she had been checking every morning for 8 years. The face that had asked her 8 days ago where his wheels were and had watched her not have an answer. The face that was grinning at her now, waiting for her to start the clock. "I'll time you," she said. Tyler turned the chair and lined himself up at the far end of his route. And Dana stood in the October yard and watched her son go. The Monday after the chair came home, Dana arrived at the diner for the morning shift and found the entire staff already assembled in the back room. Not for a meeting, just standing there, 11 of them, Pam and Delroy, and the line cooks, and the dishwashers, and old Ruth Ann, who worked the register and had been at Millie's longer than anyone could remember, all of them looking at Dana when she pushed through the door. Pam stepped forward. Pam was the one who had organized the original fundraiser without telling Dana, the one who had passed the card around. "We heard," Pam said. "We heard you got it back." Dana stood in the doorway of the break room with her coat still on. "Yeah," she said. "We got it back." How, Ruth Ann said. She said it with the directness of someone who had been asking direct questions for 70 years and saw no reason to stop. Dana thought about how to answer that. She thought about 34 engines on Alderman Street in the early morning, about Walt crouching down to Tyler's eye level and saying, "Right where you left it." "Some people saw my flyer," she said finally, "and they went looking." "Which people?" "The kind you wouldn't expect," Dana said, "but the right ones." Ruth Ann nodded slowly with the expression of someone who has lived long enough to know that the right people often turn out to be the unexpected ones. Pam hugged Dana, then Delroy, then everyone in the slightly uncertain way that groups of coworkers hug when they have all decided to do it at once. Dana stood in the middle of it and let it happen, feeling the exhaustion of 8 days sitting in her bones alongside something warmer. The knowledge that she was not as alone in this as the 8 days had sometimes made her feel. They were late opening the diner by 6 minutes. Nobody minded. Tyler went back to school that same Thursday, the day the chair came home. Donna had offered to let him take the day rest, get used to the chair again, before going back into the noise of everything school required. Tyler had looked at her like she had suggested something mildly insulting. "I want to go," he said. "Marcus doesn't know I got it back yet." So she had walked him to the bus stop on the corner of Alderman and 5th. The chair humming at a pace she did not need to rush to match, and Marcus had been there already, his backpack over both shoulders, kicking at a crack in the sidewalk. Marcus looked up. His face did something complicated and immediate, cycling through surprise and recognition, and the particular relief of a child who had been trying very hard not to show how worried he was. "You got it back," Marcus said. "We got it back," Tyler said. "How?" Tyler looked at Dana. Dana looked at Tyler. "Some people helped us," Tyler said. "The kind my mom says are like superheroes." Marcus considered this seriously. Then he nodded, apparently satisfied, and the two of them fell into conversation about something at school, the dense shorthand of children who know each other well enough to communicate in half sentences and references. Dana walked home through the October morning, feeling something she eventually decided was simply peace. The specific peace of a thing that had been broken and repaired. Tyler went to his first robotics club meeting on a Tuesday 2 weeks later. He came to the front door at 4:32. 2 minutes past the pickup time Dana had written on the permission slip, with his face lit up in a way she had not seen since July. "We're building an obstacle course, Navigator," Tyler said. "With sensors, it maps its own route." "That sounds complicated," Dana said. "It is," Tyler said with evident satisfaction. "But Ms. Okafor says I'm good at the logic part." On the bus home, Tyler felt quiet for a few stops, and then said, "Mom." "Yeah. Do you think the people who helped us do that a lot? Help people?" Dana thought about the bulletin board, about Willa Garner, about Carol Briley on Prospect Street, whose statement she had been thinking about writing to. "I think they're starting to," she said, "more than before." Tyler considered this. "That's good," he said. "There should be more of that." Dana looked at her son on the bus seat beside her, his wheelchair folded to fit in the accessible space near the door. His hands in his lap, his face turned slightly toward the window where the October streets of Millhaven were going past. "Yeah," she said, "there should." About 2 weeks after everything, Dana received a letter in the mail. An actual physical letter, handwritten on plain notepaper, postmarked from Fort Wayne. She opened it. It was from Nate Boone. 3 sentences, no salutation or preamble. "I know what I took from your family. I can't give back the 8 days. I hope the boy is doing okay." Dana sat at the kitchen table and read the 3 sentences 4 times. She did not know exactly what she felt about them. She thought about Nate Boone in the Fort Wayne Recovery Center, in whatever room they gave people who were beginning the long, uncertain work of becoming a different version of themselves. She thought about the enrollment form he had filled out with careful handwriting and the $40 he had needed and the decision he had made that morning. She thought about the address Walt had set on the coffee table without explanation. She folded the letter and put it in the kitchen drawer where she kept things she was not ready to throw away. Tyler's first lost tooth still in the small plastic case from the school nurse. A birthday card from her mother she had not responded to. A photograph of her and Gwen from before Tyler was born, standing in front of a car that had since been totaled, laughing at something she could no longer remember. She closed the drawer. Then she went to the living room where Tyler was working on something with his tablet and his headset, doing something for the robotics project, and she sat on the couch beside him and watched him work. After a few minutes, Tyler noticed her and pushed one earphone aside. What he said, nothing, Dana said. Just watching. Tyler looked at her with the evaluating gaze of a child trying to determine whether there is more to a statement than its surface. Are you okay? He said. Dana thought about the letter in the drawer, about Willa Garner, about 2 new flyers on a bulletin board she had never been inside and probably never would. Yeah, she said. I'm okay. Tyler regarded her for another moment. Then he put his earphone back on and returned to his work, his hands moving over the keyboard with the small, focused movements of someone doing something that matters to them. Dana stayed on the couch beside him until Tyler's program chimed, and he pulled off his headset and said he was finished, and could he have a snack. She made him a snack. She sat at the kitchen table while he ate it. She watched the light change in the window. As the October afternoon moved toward evening, the amber light that came through for just a few minutes before it shifted into gray. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She looked at the screen, an unknown number with a 260 area code, which was Fort Wayne and the surrounding area. She answered. Hello, the voice said. A woman's voice, older, cautious. Is this Dana Mercer? Yes, Dana said. This is Dana. A pause. My name is Willa Garner, the woman said. A man named Walt Briggs told me to call you. He said you might be willing to talk to me about not giving up when everything looks closed. Dana looked out the kitchen window. Down the street, she could see the telephone pole on the corner of Alderman and 5th, the one she had stapled a flyer to 11 days ago. The flyer itself was mostly gone now, just the metal staple catching the last of the amber light. She pulled her chair closer to the table and settled in. Yes, Dana said. I'm willing to talk to you. I've got time. Tell me what happened. And Willa Garner, 71 years old, living in Hartfield, Indiana, with a tarp over a hole where her chimney used to be, and $47,000 gone, and a police department that had told her there wasn't enough documentation for charges, began to tell her story. Dana listened to every word. She did not interrupt. She did not offer solutions or timelines or promises she could not keep. She simply listened the way she had needed someone to listen to her, with her full attention and without the distraction of thinking about what she was going to say next. Outside the kitchen window, the October light faded and the streetlights came on one by one down the length of Alderman Street. Tyler finished his snack and rolled himself to the kitchen doorway and looked in at his mother, who was sitting at the table with her phone pressed to her ear and her eyes on the window, her expression focused in the way of someone doing something that matters. He watched her for a moment, then he turned and rolled back to the living room, leaving her to it. He understood, in the way that children understand things they have not been directly told, that his mother was helping someone. That whatever had happened over the past 8 days, whatever chain of things it had set in motion, was not finished. That the woman who had walked this neighborhood until her feet bled and refused to accept no as the final answer was the same woman now sitting at the kitchen table with her full attention given to a stranger on the other end of a phone line. He was not surprised by this. He had always known what his mother was made of. He had just been waiting for everyone else to find out too. In the kitchen, Dana Mercer listened. And on the east side of Millhaven, Indiana, in a brick building with steel-reinforced doors and motorcycles parked along the gravel lot, 2 new flyers caught a draft from the doorway when someone came in from the cold and shifted slightly against their pins on the bulletin board. Nobody moved to secure them. They would hold. On the morning of the second Tuesday of November, Tyler woke before Dana did. She heard the sound of his door opening and then the soft hum of the chair's motor in the hallway, navigating the narrow space in the careful way he had learned over 8 months of living in this apartment. The small adjustment of the joystick that kept him clear of the doorframe, the tighter turn at the hallway's end. She lay in bed and listened to her son move through the apartment on his own, the way she had listened to his breathing for years, checking the rhythm of it. She heard him reach the kitchen, the refrigerator opening. The sounds of Tyler making himself breakfast, a capability he had developed slowly over the past year and took a specific and evident pride in. Cereal into a bowl, the refrigerator again for milk, a spoon from the drawer. She heard him wheel to the table, the sound of the chairs settling. Silence for a while, which meant he was eating. She lay in bed and looked at the ceiling and listened to the ordinary sounds of her son living his life on the other side of the thin wall, and she felt something she could not immediately name. It was not quite happiness, though happiness was part of it. It was more like the specific relief of a person who has been holding their breath for a long time and has finally remembered how to breathe normally, the relief of ordinary things being ordinary again. She got up at 7:30. Tyler was at the kitchen table with his cereal bowl pushed to one side and his tablet propped against the salt shaker, watching something with his earbuds in. He pulled one out when he heard Dana come in. "Morning," he said. "Morning, Bug. Did you eat?" He pointed at the cereal bowl. Dana made coffee and sat across from him at the kitchen table, and they stayed there together in the morning quiet, Tyler watching his show, and Dana drinking her coffee and looking out the window at the street below, which was empty and still in the way that Tuesday mornings were still before the day got started. There was a moment about halfway through her second cup when Tyler pulled out both earbuds and set his tablet face down on the table and looked at Dana. "Mom," he said. "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment, looking at his hands, which were resting on the edge of the table in front of him. "I keep thinking about those guys," he said. "Which guys?" "The Iron Road guys, Walt and all of them." Dana looked at him. "What about them?" Tyler was quiet for another moment, working through something. "I just think about them a lot," he said finally. "Coming down our street like that, with all the motorcycles. I think about it when I'm at school and stuff. It doesn't feel like something that actually happened." "How does it feel?" she said. Tyler looked at the table. "Like something in a book," he said. "Like something that happens to people in stories. Not like something that happens to real people." Dana thought about that. "It happened to real people," she said. "To us." "I know," Tyler said. He looked up at her. "That's the part I keep thinking about." Dana looked at her son across the kitchen table in the chair that was his and had been returned to him by 34 strangers who did not owe him anything and had done it anyway, and she thought about what she wanted to tell him. "Real people do extraordinary things," Dana said finally. "It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens more than people think because the people who actually do it usually don't talk about it much afterward." "Why not?" Dana thought about Walt changing the subject when Rex tried to make something of it, about the way Finn had just said it was good and left. "Because the people who actually do extraordinary things aren't usually doing them to have a story to tell," she said. "They're doing it because something in front of them needed doing and they were the ones who happened to be there." Tyler considered this. "Like you," he said. Dana blinked. "Me." "You put up all those flyers," Tyler said. "You walked everywhere for a week. You didn't do that so you'd have a story. You did it because it needed doing." Dana looked at her son. "I did it because you needed your chair back." Tyler shook his head slightly with the patience of someone explaining something to an adult who is not quite getting it. "Yeah," he said, "but that's what I mean. That's the same thing. It needed doing and you were the one who was there." He picked up his tablet and put his earbuds back in. Dana sat at the kitchen table for a while longer, holding her coffee cup with both hands, looking at her son, watching his show. She thought he might be right. She thought it was possible that the things she had done for 8 days, the walking and the flyers, and the standing outside the grocery store, and the refusing to accept the answer she had been given, was a version of the same thing that Walt in his chapter did, that Colt did when he stopped at the telephone pole, that Tyler did when he sat at a library computer and searched a name and printed out what he found and left it on the kitchen table. The thing where you see something that needs doing and you are the person who is there. Maybe that was all it was. Maybe that was everything it was. She finished her coffee. She washed both their dishes. She went to get dressed because Tuesday still had things in it. A shift at the diner starting at 10 and laundry, and the ordinary accumulated logistics of a life that was theirs and was intact and was moving forward. Before she left the kitchen, she stopped and looked at the drawer under the counter, where she kept the things she did not know what to do with yet. She thought about Nate Boone's letter, 3 sentences in careful handwriting. She thought about Carol Briley on Prospect Street. She opened the drawer and took out a notepad and a pen. She sat down and wrote a letter. It did not take long. She told Carol Briley that she had read her statement in a newspaper article and that she was sorry for what had happened and that she wanted Carol to know someone had read it and was thinking about her. She did not offer solutions or make promises. She just wrote the truth of what she had to say. She addressed the envelope from the phone book listing she found online and put a stamp on it and set it on the counter where she would see it when she left and remember to put it in the mailbox. Then she went to get dressed. In the living room, Tyler was still at the table tablet in front of him, earbuds in the chair holding him at exactly the right angle, the sticker on the headrest visible from where Dana stood in the hallway, a small green grin that had been there since March and would be there for as long as Tyler decided he wanted it there. He did not look up. He did not need to. Dana went to get ready for the day. Walt Briggs drove through the intersection at Creston and 5th that same Thursday evening on his way home from the clubhouse. He had been taking different routes for 9 years, long enough that the avoidance had become as automatic as anything else he did without thinking, the way certain habits accumulate when they are doing the work of protecting you from something you are not ready to face. But that Thursday, he drove straight. He slowed at the intersection and looked at it, the faded asphalt, the uneven curb, the place where the bike had gone down on a September afternoon 9 years ago, when the light was in Danny's eyes and there was no painted crosswalk and a car came through too fast. He sat at the intersection for a moment. A car behind him tapped its horn gently. Walt pulled through and kept going. He did not feel resolved or healed or any of the things people said you felt when you finally faced a thing you had been avoiding. He just felt like a man who had driven through an intersection. But it was a different intersection than it had been last week in some way he could not fully articulate, because last week it had been only the place where everything ended, and now it was also the place where something had started. A 9-year chain of events that had ended with a boy named Tyler rolling across a porch on a Thursday morning with his arms thrown up in a gesture that looked from a certain angle like the kind of celebration that did not require an audience. Walt drove home. He made dinner. He called his daughter in Cincinnati and asked about the kids, his grandchildren, who were 5 and 7, and had their mother's eyes and his habit of stating opinions with more confidence than the evidence necessarily warranted. After he hung up, he sat in the kitchen for a while with his coffee and looked at the hinge of his left wrist where Danny's name was inked in letters that had blurred slightly at the edges over 9 years of weather and work. He thought about the bulletin board at the clubhouse and the 2 new flyers pinned there by men who had decided on their own that this was something Iron Road did now. He thought about a woman in Hartfield who was 71 years old and had lost $47,000 and been told by the police there wasn't enough documentation for charges. He thought about what it had taken to put a specific name beside a specific phone number on a piece of paper and set it on a coffee table in front of a man who still had time to choose something different. He finished his coffee and washed the cup and went to bed. He slept well. He usually did. Donna Mercer sent a text to Walt's number the evening of the day she talked to Willa Garner for 40 minutes. "Talk to Willa Garner tonight," Dana typed. 40 minutes. She's going to think about her options. I told her to call me again. She sent it and put the phone face down on the table. It buzzed 30 seconds later. Good, Walt typed back. That's exactly what she needed. Dana looked at the text for a moment. Then she put the phone away and went to check on Tyler the way she always did at the end of the day, standing in the doorway of his room and listening. The chair was parked at the end of his bed in the spot where it always sat now, and the green dinosaur sticker on the headrest caught a small piece of light from the hallway and glinted. She stood there for a moment, steady, even, good. She went to bed. She fell asleep quickly the way she had been falling asleep since the morning the chair came home, as though her body had been holding itself awake for 8 days and was now making up the debt with efficient and uncomplicated darkness. She did not dream about cut chains or empty porches or case numbers that did not exist. She dreamed about something ordinary that she could not remember by the time the alarm went off, and when she woke up, she lay there for a moment in the pre-dawn dark and listened through the thin wall to her son's breathing. Steady, even, good. She got up. She patted across the cold linoleum in her socks. She cracked open Tyler's door. He was still asleep, dark blonde hair in 4 directions. The chair at the foot of the bed where it belonged, the sticker catching nothing now in the dark of the room. She stood there for a moment and looked at her son sleeping and thought about everything it had taken to get to this specific ordinary morning, this unremarkable Tuesday in late October in a small apartment in Millhaven, Indiana, where everything was exactly where it was supposed to be. Then she went to make coffee. Outside on Alderman Street, a car went past. Then another. The garbage truck was somewhere on the next block, its hydraulics starting and stopping in the particular early morning rhythm that she had stopped hearing years ago and now found she was listening to again, paying attention to the sounds of the neighborhood the way you pay attention to something you almost lost. The coffee maker beeped. Dana poured a cup and stood at the kitchen window and watched the street come alive in the early October light, the particular light of a morning that had nothing special planned for it, nothing that would be worth writing down. Just another Tuesday moving through Millhaven, the way Tuesdays did, steadily and without announcement. She drank her coffee. She thought about Willa Garner, who would wake up this morning in Hartfield with the same problem she had gone to sleep with. But who might wake up with one thing she had not had before the phone call, which was the knowledge that someone had listened to her and that the door in the wall sometimes turned out to be a window. A cautious brightness was how it started. She finished her coffee and got ready for work, and was out the door with 20 minutes to spare, which was more margin than she usually gave herself, but which felt since the 8 days like the right way to move through time, with a little room, with something held in reserve. She walked to the diner in the November cold, her coat buttoned to the top, her hands in her pockets. She passed the telephone pole on Creston Avenue on her way. The staple from her flyer was still there, just the staple, the paper long gone. She did not stop. She walked past it, the way she walked past everything now, with attention, with the awareness of a person who has learned that the things you pass every day are worth looking at because you do not always get to pass them as many times as you assume. At the end of her shift, she sat for a moment in the break room before putting on her coat. Her phone buzzed, a text from Walt. Willa Garner's situation, Walt wrote. Making progress. The contractor's LLC had a dormant partner who didn't know about the fraud, cooperating with documentation. Dana read it twice. Then she texted back. That's good news. Walt's reply came quickly. Yes. Dana thought about a cautious brightness, about a window in a wall, about the specific way that progress looked when you were inside it, incremental and uncertain, and requiring you to keep moving even when you could not see the full shape of where you were going. She put her phone in her pocket and put on her coat and went home to her son. At 5:40 the next morning, did she heard Tyler's alarm go off through the thin wall, the small chime of a phone waking a boy who had his whole life in front of him and a chair that was going to help him move through it. Hey, Bug, she called through the wall. 5 more minutes, Tyler called back. You said that 4 minutes ago. Then 5 more minutes from now. Dana smiled and set down her coffee cup and went to help her son start the day. The green dinosaur sticker was still on the headrest. The joystick responded to the lightest possible touch. The wheels were true, both of them calibrated precisely to the surface of a cracked and imperfect sidewalk in Millhaven, Indiana, in the last days of October, carrying a boy who had somewhere to be. They always figured it out. They always would. The envelope from Iron Road sat on the kitchen table for 3 days before Dana could bring herself to count it properly. She knew roughly what was inside. She could feel the weight of it, but there was something about formally counting the money that felt like the final acknowledgement of everything the 8 days had cost, and she kept finding reasons to do something else first. On the 3rd day, she sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and counted it carefully, bill by bill, making neat stacks. $4,200. She sat with that number for a long time. It was not enough to replace the chair if something happened again. It was not a solution to the broader arithmetic of their life, the insurance premiums and the medical equipment, maintenance costs, and the ongoing negotiations with the school district that would continue indefinitely. It was not a miracle, but it was 3 months of rent and the refill of every emergency fund that the 8 days had drained and something left over to put back in savings against the next impossible thing. It was breathing room. In Dana Mercer's life, breathing room was not nothing. Breathing room was everything. She called Gwen in Columbus. Gwen picked up on the second ring the way she always did when she saw Dana's number, with the slightly heightened alertness of someone who had spent 3 years waiting for the call that meant something had gone wrong. Dana told her what had happened, all of it from the morning she found the cut chain through Holt's 95-minute arrival, through 7 days of flyers and bleeding feet through Colt Dixon, stopping at a telephone pole, through a garage where Finn worked through the night, through 34 engines on Alderman Street in the early morning. Gwen cried for 10 minutes. Dana let her holding the phone and looking out the kitchen window at the street below, where a week ago she had walked back and forth distributing paper to strangers. I need to pay you back, Dana said when Gwen had stopped crying. The loan, that's not. Gwen stopped. That can wait. It can't, Dana said. Not for me. She looked at the stacks of bills on the table. I have some of it right now, and I'll have the rest by January. Let me at least start. There was a silence on the line. You're going to make me cry again, Gwen said. That's fine. You always say it like that, like crying is just weather. Dana thought about that. Maybe it is, she said. It comes and it goes. You can't stop it. You might as well just be where you are. Gwen laughed a wet and slightly rueful laugh. I love you, she said. I love you too. Now let me give you some of your money back. She sent Gwen a transfer that evening. Not all of it, but enough to show she was serious. Enough to feel like the debt was moving in the right direction. Then she put the remaining money in the savings account she had been emptying for 8 days and closed the banking app and went to check on Tyler, who had fallen asleep in his chair in the living room with his tablet propped on his lap and an unfinished homework assignment visible on the screen. She carefully moved the tablet. She did not move him because the chair was holding him at the right angle and he was comfortable, and sometimes the best thing you could do for someone was simply not disturb what was already working. She went to bed at 10:30 for the first time in 8 days and slept until the alarm went off. It was the best sleep she had had in a year. Roscoe Holt filed a supplementary report on the Boone case on the Friday after the chair came home. He was not required to. There was no supervisor asking for it, no open investigation demanding documentation, no procedural trigger that would have generated the requirement. He filed it because he had decided to. The report documented the recovery of the stolen wheelchair through the intervention of an unspecified community organization, declined to name specific individuals involved in the recovery operation, and noted that Nate Boone had voluntarily entered inpatient substance treatment at a certified facility on the Thursday following the incident, a detail Holt had confirmed through a call to the Fort Wayne Recovery Center's intake line, where a man named Gerald Pruitt had confirmed the enrollment without providing details. Holt sat at his desk after filing the report and looked at the case status. Resolved. He looked at the notation he had typed. Resolution by other means. He thought about what other means had actually looked like. 34 men who had moved through the city in one night and found what he had declined to look for. A woman who had walked until her feet bled because the alternative was letting her son believe nobody was looking for him. A boy who had sat at a library computer and searched a detective's name and printed out what he found and left it on the kitchen table without saying a word. Holt got up and walked to the break room and poured a cup of coffee he did not want, and stood at the window that looked out over the parking lot and thought about 11 months. He had been counting down to retirement with the focus of a man who had decided the destination was the point, and the remaining journey was just logistics. He had been processing cases with the minimum necessary engagement, conserving himself for something on the other side of the calendar, and he had told himself that this was wisdom, that experience taught you where to invest and where to stop wasting investment on outcomes you could not change. He stood at the break room window and tried to remember when he had decided that a stolen wheelchair was an outcome he could not change. He could not locate the specific moment. It had not been a decision exactly. It had been a drift, the slow accumulation of small decisions not to look any harder than the surface required, until looking at the surface was all he knew how to do. He went back to his desk. He opened the file on the family from Prospect Street in 2021. He read the mother's statement again, all the way through this time, and then he took out a notepad and wrote down her name and address. He did not know yet what he was going to do with that information. He only knew that the right thing to do with information was not to leave it in a system where it had been filed and forgotten. The right thing to do was to look at it until it told you what it needed. He put the notepad in his jacket pocket and went back to work. There was a Saturday morning in mid-November, cold and still, when Tyler made breakfast for both of them without being asked. Dana woke to the smell of toast and the sound of the chair's motor humming quietly through the wall. She lay in bed for a moment and then listened to the sounds of her son moving around the kitchen, the refrigerator opening and closing the drawer that always stuck slightly, the particular rattle of the silverware tray. When she came out, Tyler had set 2 bowls of cereal on the table and 2 pieces of toast beside each bowl and 2 glasses of orange juice, and was sitting in his chair looking at his tablet with the expression of someone waiting for something to be acknowledged. Dana sat down across from him. "You made breakfast," she said. "I was up first," Tyler said, like it was obvious. Dana looked at the 2 bowls, the 2 glasses, the careful symmetry of it. "Thank you," she said. Tyler shrugged in the way of an 8-year-old who has done something generous and does not entirely know what to do with being thanked for it. They ate breakfast together at the kitchen table in the November morning. both of them quiet in the easy way that people are quiet when they do not need to fill the silence. Dana drank her coffee and looked out the window at Alderman Street, which was gray and still in the early November light. Tyler finished his cereal and started reading something on his tablet. After a while, Tyler said, "Mom, yeah, do you think Marcus would be good at robotics?" Dana thought about Marcus, his particular combination of physical restlessness and genuine kindness. "Maybe," she said. "Do you want to ask him?" Tyler considered. "Maybe after the holidays," he said, "so I can learn enough to explain it right." "That's thoughtful," Dana said. Tyler looked at her. "It's not thoughtful," he said. "It's practical. If I can't explain it, he'll just get bored." Dana pressed her lips together to keep from smiling too wide. "Yeah," she said. "That's probably right." Tyler went back to his tablet. Dana sat at the table for a few more minutes, watching the street outside the window, thinking about all the ordinary Saturdays that had been ordinary before and would be ordinary again, the ones that did not require anything of her except to be present in them, and about how it was possible to miss that ordinariness so completely while you were in the middle of it that you forgot it was a gift at all. She thought about 200 flyers, about bleeding feet, about the specific quality of a sound that builds from down the length of a street before you can see what is making it. She thought about a green dinosaur sticker pressed into a headrest, grinning at no one in particular, just grinning because that was what it did, because that was what Tyler had put it there to do. Then she finished her coffee and helped Tyler get ready for the day, and they went out together into the November morning, and the chair hummed quietly over the cracked sidewalk toward whatever the day had in it, and Dana Mercer kept moving forward the way she had always kept moving forward, one step at a time, figuring it out. The robotics club met on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and by the third week, Tyler had become something of an unofficial explainer for the other kids on the sensor calibration problem they were all working through. Miss Okafor had noticed it and mentioned it to Dana at pickup one Thursday afternoon, standing in the hallway outside room 14 with the particular warm specificity of a teacher describing something that had genuinely surprised her. "He just picks it up," Miss Okafor said, "and then he turns around and finds a way to hand it to somebody else. That's not something you can teach." Dana looked at her son through the door's small window, sitting at the work table with two other kids leaning in toward his tablet screen. Tyler's hands moving as he explained something, the focused, patient expression he got when he was working through a thing he understood well. "No," Dana said, "you can't teach that." She thought about him printing the article and leaving it on the kitchen table. About him telling Marcus that the people who helped them were like superheroes, and then watching Marcus nod like that made complete sense. She thought about the first morning, the way he had said, "I needed to go places," with the quiet certainty of someone stating an obvious and unalterable truth. Tyler had always been like this, stating things plainly, turning them over until he understood them, and then handing what he had found to whoever needed it. Dana had just not always had the vocabulary for it, the kind of intelligence that looks past the surface of something to what the surface means. She thanked Ms. Okafor and waited for Tyler in the hallway, and when he came through the door, the expression on his face was the same one it always was at After Robotics. The particular satisfaction of someone who has spent time doing something that matters to them and has left the room slightly better organized than they found it. "Good session," Dana said. "We figured out the left sensor problem," Tyler said. "I showed everyone what I did, and then Priya figured out why it worked, which is better than me just figuring out how to do it, because now we understand it." Dana walked beside her son down the hallway and out through the school's side entrance toward the bus stop, the chair humming over the concrete, the November air cold and clean. "That's a good distinction," Dana said. Tyler looked at her. "What?" "Knowing how versus knowing why." "Oh," Tyler thought about it. "Yeah, the why is what you can use again." Dana let that sit for a moment. The why is what you can use again. She thought about why she had not given up after 8 days after Holt, after the insurance company, after standing outside the grocery store until her feet bled and the words stopped sounding like words. She thought about why Walt had called a full meeting at 11 at night instead of waiting until morning. She thought about why Colt had stopped at a telephone pole when he had been riding past telephone poles for 6 years without stopping. Not the how of any of it, the why. The bus came and they got on Tyler's armchair, folding into the accessible space, Dana settling into the seat beside him, the November streets of Millhaven going past outside the window in the low gray afternoon light. She thought about Willa Garner, who had called back 2 days after their first conversation. Not with news, not with a development or a decision, just to talk, to process what she was considering, to hear another voice that was not telling her the wall had no door in it. Dana had answered and talked for 35 minutes, and then given Willa the best advice she had, which was not about contractors or LLCs or paperwork, but about the state of mind required to keep looking when you had already been told by everyone official that there was nothing to find. You keep moving, Dana had said, not because you know it's going to work, but because stopping is the only thing that guarantees it won't. Willa had been quieter for a moment. Then she had said, "All right, I can do that." Dana had believed her. On the bus, Tyler had fallen quiet and was looking out the window at the streets. The particular inward look he got when he was thinking about something he had not finished yet. "Mom," he said after a while. "Yeah." "Do you think Holt is going to be okay?" Dana turned to look at him. "Holt, the detective." Tyler continued looking out the window. "Do you think he knows why he didn't do his job? Not just that he didn't, but why?" Dana thought about the sedan driving slowly past the building, about the supplementary report she had never officially been told about, but that the city's public case tracking system had quietly updated 3 days after the chair came home with a notation she had found when she checked it one evening out of habit. "I think he might be starting to figure it out," she said. Tyler nodded slowly. "That's good," he said, "because if you know why something went wrong, you can maybe not do it again." He turned from the window and looked at her with the clear, direct gaze he had been giving her since before he could walk, the gaze that said he was seeing what was actually there and not what he hoped was there. "Like you figured out why nobody helped us," he said, "and now you're helping that lady in Hartfield, because you know why people stop, and you know why they don't have to." Dana looked at her son on the bus seat beside her, bundled against the November cold, his chair folded neatly in the space near the door, and she felt something so complete and specific move through her that she did not try to name it or contain it. She just let it move through her and settle. "Yeah," she said, "something like that." Tyler turned back to the window. "I'm going to learn the why on the obstacle navigator by Thursday," he said. "Not just how it maps, but why the algorithm works that way instead of another way." "That sounds like a plan," Dana said. "It is," Tyler said. "I already know part of it. I just need to figure out the rest." He said it the way he said most things, simply and directly, as if the figuring out was just a matter of time and attention, as if there was no question that he would get there. Dana watched the streets of Millhaven go past outside the bus window and thought that this right here was the thing she had been carrying all along without fully knowing she was carrying it. Not the chair, though the chair mattered enormously. Not the logistics of the 8 days, though those had nearly broken her. The specific certainty that her son carried in his chest like a small, steady light, the absolute expectation that he would figure out the rest, that the figuring out was just a matter of time and attention, that the world did not stop being worth engaging with simply because it had been difficult to engage with. She had given him that, or helped give it to him, over 8 years of getting up every morning and making the call and finding the path and refusing to let the wall be the final answer. And he had given it back to her over and over in the ways she was still recognizing. "I know part of it," he had said. "I just need to figure out the rest." Dana Mercer rode the bus home through the November streets of Millhaven and felt for the first time since a Tuesday morning in October, when she had found a cut chain and an empty porch, that the rest was something she could figure out too. One step, one morning, one door or window or telephone pole with a flyer on it that caught someone's eye at exactly the right moment. They always figured it out. The bus stopped at the corner of Alderman and Fifth. Donna and Tyler got off the chair, humming back to life on the sidewalk, the November air cold and honest and entirely bearable. They turned toward home.